Well, like, so usually my sort of rambling videos, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, but I thought I would just do one on my way up the road, up the A9, simply because weather has got a tendency as of late to be terrible, and with work commitments and whatnot, I just do not have the time at the moment to like go out to the usual places that I would go to in order to record a video and whatnot. So I thought I would just fucking do one in the car briefly, purely because there's something that's been bothering me for a wee bit now and I want to just sort of get it off my chest. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now as I drive. So the topic of this video, as the title would suggest, is the far right. The far right! The big bad far right, okay? There's a few things I want to sort of talk about in this regard, but I think I'll first and foremost start off with the so-called protest that's occurring next weekend in Scotland and Glasgow. The pro-UK rally, as it's been sort of classed as now. Now, from memory, I remember Tommy Robinson a while ago announcing this event, which was then followed swiftly with Jesus, bit of a bumpy road here, which was followed swiftly with Susan Aitken, who is a member of the SNP but also the Glasgow Council leader. She came out and said that Tommy Robinson's not welcome in Glasgow, and people who share Tommy Robinson's values and beliefs are not welcome in Glasgow. The usual tropes came out, such as far right, etc. Followed swiftly after said fact, followed by, you know, a couple of Green MSPs or Green councillors. Maggie Chapman, in fact, got involved. There was a few people of that political persuasion got involved to sort of add their 2 cents and say these people are not welcome in Glasgow. Or in Scotland, actually, for that matter. So we've got this event taking place next week. I've not heard Tommy Robinson or anybody of his ilk actually speaking about it recently at all. I think that might be why it's now been sort of dubbed a pro-UK rally. So you're going to have people potentially turning up to this event next weekend, and it's really going to only lead to a couple of different outcomes as far as I can tell. You're going to be vastly outnumbered by quote-unquote leftists, or you're going to just end up in trouble. Now, the reason that I think you might end up in trouble is because of all the bullshit that's been taking place the last couple of months. Okay? Right? I don't really need to speak on that much further. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay? Fast forward though, and we get to the outcome of being outnumbered. Now, you could end up in trouble and be outnumbered. I mean, one is not, you know, one isn't going to occur if the other one does occur, you know, vice versa. But when I say that there's a potential for you to be outnumbered, it's because all I have seen for weeks and weeks and weeks is, within this sort of political dichotomy / paradigm of left and right, what you're seeing is a lot of anti-fascist, quote-unquote, anti-racist, quote-unquote, and whatnot, rustling up the troops. You know, they're going to bus in people. I mean, Glasgow's like the sort of epicenter of these people anyway, but they're going to be bussing in people. They're rallying the troops, etc., etc., to sort of take a stand against the so-called far right. So you're going to be outnumbered regardless, because time and time again what you do see in Scotland is a serious lack of what could even be considered far right. So my recommendation would sincerely be to anybody listening to this, don't go. Just don't go. Yes, you're going to see the gloating after the fact of, we showed the far right. We showed the far right. They didn't even turn up. Or even if some people do turn up, you're going to get outnumbered anyway. So what's going to happen? It just goes to show that Scotland's so progressive. You know, we outnumbered them, etc. So just why bother? Why bother? And then the pushback to what I'm saying there, to my rhetorical question, might be something along the lines of, but we need to turn up to show the government that we're sick of what's going on. Well, my pushback to that would be to look at something pretty fucking simple. And that is that our government is well aware of the anger, is well aware of the sort of contempt that people are beginning to have, the anguish that people are beginning to sort of showcase. And the proof that I will provide to you is pretty simple in actuality, and that is the fact that every single election cycle in recent memory, right, from our so-called uni party and whatnot, right, what have they done? They have promised a reduction in immigration. Every single election, whether it be Labour or the Tory, they have always promised to quell illegal immigration. They've always promised to reduce legal migration, and they never fucking do, right? But the reason that they promise these things is because they're throwing the metaphorical red meat to their base, because they know that the majority of people within said country are sick of immigration. That's why it's always on the promise list. Second point I want to bring up is the term far right in and of itself. Far right. It's ridiculous. When you hear the term far right, and obviously this is the doing of the politicians and the media and the activists, fascist, right? You're fascist, or you're a goose stepper, right? You've got Mein Kampf in your fucking bathroom. Of course you do, right? But they never actually define far right. And why is that? If you want my honest opinion on the matter, the reason I think they will not define far right is because in order to define far right, they set definitions and they set parameters. So if you just say enough, but not enough to be considered or to fall into their categories or their definitions, then you would technically not be considered far right. So if they do not actually define it, they can apply the label to whomever they disagree with, politically speaking. Okay, and obviously the unhinged people just think everybody's far right anyway, but what I'm trying to say is if they set a bar, if they set parameters and they set a definition, right? Oh, you have to be anti-Semitic and you have to be a white supremacist, etc., right? So if you don't say anything anti-Semitic or you don't say anything that could be considered white supremacist in nature, then technically, because they've set a definition and legal standards, if you don't say these things, then they have a hard time justifying calling you far right. So if they don't actually define it, they can call anybody they want far right, and that's exactly what they're doing. That is exactly what they're doing. I'm starting to steam up a bit here. And I'll give you a wee funny story. You know, years ago there was some pro-independence thing going on in Inverness, where my grandmother stays. There was like a stand in the town centre, and they were trying to get people to sign up to the SNP. And my granny is like a staunch unionist. So she went up to the stand and ended up arguing with him. And, you know, to cut a long story short, what ended up happening was they called my grandmother a fascist. Okay? This is what we're dealing with here. This is what we're dealing with here. These people call everybody far right. These people insinuate everybody's far right. They base policies on the back of these wacky fucking notions that so many people are far right. And I mean, even if you want to be like serious about it, when like even the way that the media report things, they'll be like, the far right are gaining traction in the EU and whatnot. Why? Why? Like fucking why? Define far right, they never do it, but why? Why would that be? Why would that be? Of course, we know the answer to this. When questions are rhetorical here, we know the answers. It's just ridiculous. Oh, the far right, they just manipulate people. No, they don't know, because they don't fucking exist. For a start, there is no far right party. They call people like Nigel Farage far right. They call people like Tommy Robinson far right. They're not far right. Fucking hell. But it is ridiculous. It is. But then when it comes to the gloating in Scotland that we've seen, I mean, this stuff really gets on my nerves. So obviously the events that were going off in England, right, post murder of 3 children, okay, protests, some turned into riots and whatnot, okay, you could make the argument there was agitators and whatnot involved, okay, like, no, I'm not condoning like fucking burning like police cars or whatever the case may be, okay, but you know, I will say on that note, like just like several weeks prior to that, there was the events that took place with like the gypsies and the Muslims and whatnot, over social services taking out a kid from a house or something, they were burning buses and whatnot, and you know, the sort of the difference of treatment that these people received speaks volumes. Regardless, though, what we've seen during this time frame in Scotland was our media. Why the far right don't have control in Scotland? Why Scotland is such a more progressive country, etc, etc. This falls on the, like, they were gloating, and it really annoys me. This falls on the back, of course, of a video I made like 2 months ago now, where, and I cannot remember for the life of me the name of them, but basically it's people that sort of, they're social studies people, social science people, and they're monitoring attitudes to immigration and whatnot in Scotland, and they themselves concede that, like, attitudes in Scotland are beginning to change slowly and slightly, not enough to be alarmed at present. They're not as in favour of immigration as they used to be, but they simultaneously also concede that the vast majority of people that they're surveying, they've never actually lived in quote-unquote diverse areas, right? So the reason that I bring this up is because what needs to be stressed here is, for all the fucking gloating about a lack of far-right in Scotland, you need to actually understand that the reason that that might very well be the case is not because we're all progressive and leftists and whatnot. What might be a much more simple hypothesis to this this apparent questionable anomaly in British politics regarding Scottish apathy and whatnot, is that we at present overall as a majority are not experiencing the same sort of levels of diversity that other parts of the UK are experiencing. You know, the far right, as they keep defining it as, do not just appear out of fucking nowhere. Okay? The other thing I will say as well is that for the parts of Scotland that are experiencing the most immigration, it's fucking terrifying. Edinburgh, Glasgow, Greenock, Paisley, these parts of the country are slowly, and when I say slowly, I mean slower than other parts of the country, but slowly in comparison to the sort of acceleration of English demography. They're slowly becoming unrecognisable, okay? Unrecognisable. This isn't a religious issue. This isn't even a white or a black issue. Because, I mean, why do you think a lot of people vote for fucking Brexit? They weren't doing it to stop brown and black people coming in, were they? They were getting fed up to of EU immigrants coming in, who, for the most part, are white. You know, I know that's starting to change slightly now, given the sort of context of the world that we live in at present. How is it far right, though, on a side note, how is it far right to be concerned about immigration? How is it far right to have a problem or a concern with your town becoming unrecognisable? How is it